Welcome back to Leaders, a podcast dedicated to exploring the best leaders this world has ever seen. On today's episode, we cover the man behind McDonald's, arguably the most successful food chain in history, and the man behind it, Ray Kroc. Ray is portrayed in the movie Founder under Michael Keaton, and also leveraged Grinding It Out, which is one of the books written by Ray Kroc. McDonald's has had a footprint within the U.S. and global food ecosystem for the past 50 or so years, and it's become a dominant player. So what better way to really study the success of that franchise than by studying the leader behind it, Mr. Ray Kroc. So going into Ray's rise to really taking over McDonald's. And so he started as a milkshake salesman who was impressed by the efficiency and speed of the McDonald Brothers restaurant in San Bernardino, California. He eventually convinced them to let them franchise their concept, and he opened the first McDonald's in Des Plaines, Illinois in 1955. Now, Ray quickly realized that the McDonald's Brothers system could be replicated on a much larger scale. He bought them out in 1961 and began to aggressively expand the company. He opened new restaurants all over the country, and he instituted a strict system of standards and procedures to ensure that every restaurant was consistent. He could be described as a ruthless businessman, but also a visionary, and he saw the potential of McDonald's to become a global brand, was willing to really do whatever it took to make that happen. Under his leadership, he grew it from a small chain of restaurants into what is today a multi-billion-dollar corporation. He served as the CEO of McDonald's from 1967 to 1973, and he remained chairman of the board until his death in 1984. And also, he really honed in on the sale of only single-store franchises instead of selling larger territorial franchises, which was common in the industry at the time. So he really bucked that trend and helped pioneer that. We've already kind of gone through some of those major timelines of how he originally got interested really in the McDonald's Brothers business and then convinced them to franchise that out. And so the legacy of Mr. Kroc is a mixed one. So he's often credited with transforming it into the global fast food empire it is today. He also did have some ruthless business practices and maybe exploited the McDonald brothers in the venture. But really, I think first and foremost, he's a visionary who saw the potential for it to become a global brand. He succeeded beyond anyone's really wildest dreams. And part of that was that while the McDonald's core product, is burgers, fries, shakes, he really said that they weren't in the burger business. He was really in the real estate business, and you don't build an empire off a 1.4% cut of at that time, a 15-cent hamburger. He said, you build it by owning the land upon which that burger is cooked. What you ought to be doing is buying up plots of land and then turning around and leasing those lots to franchisees, who as a condition of their deal are permitted to lease from you and you alone. So a very kind of like savvy business move, not only to realize the potential of what he could do from a McDonald's standpoint, but just the realization that the wealth and the success of expanding and scaling this would come from purchasing the land of which these stores would be built upon. And so how did he do that? What type of leader was Ray? So let's get into his leadership styles and really dive into what made him successful there. And so even though he was always open to suggestions, kind of would say his core leadership style was autocratic. He took all the decisions with his top management. No feedback from the employees was really taken. He had an ambitious mindset and was ready for changes even when he wasn't looking for it. He ensures that only the right decisions are being made, apart from being a crowd's favorite one, he took his leadership approach very seriously. He used to take decisions according to the autocratic leadership style, where the end decision is always taken by the leader. Even though he was one of the autocratic leaders, every one of his employees respected him for making the right decision at the right time. And I think from a management structure standpoint, as we go back to episode 3 and Jack Welch and a management structure, I think this Ray Kroc quote will encapsulate a lot of the parallels that you see to what we outline with GE and Jack Welch. And so Ray says, authority should go with the job. Some wrong decisions may be made as a result, but that's the only way you can encourage strong people to grow in an organization. Sit on them and they will be stifled. The best ones go elsewhere. I knew that from my past experiences with my boss, John Clark, at Lilly Tulip Cup. I believe that less is more in the case of corporate management. For its size, McDonald's today is the most unstructured corporation I know. I don't think you can find a happier, more secure, harder working group of executives anywhere. And we go into kind of the leadership lessons from Ray, and he's again quoted saying, the quality of a leader is reflected in the standards they set for themselves. And so we're going to take an excerpt from Charisma, a small book that outlines 10 leadership lessons from his life. And so let's dive into those 10 now, and we'll kind of context it with maybe some quotes and actions as to speak to each. And so first is having a vision. So Ray had a vision, clear vision for what McDonald's could be, and he never wavered from it. He was able to inspire others to share his vision and work together to make it a reality. He saw it kind of as a global fast food empire. He was willing to really invest heavily into making that vision a reality. 2, be passionate. So he was passionate about McDonald's, and his enthusiasm was contagious. He believed in his product and his people, and he never gave up on his goals. Number 3, be a great communicator. So he was a master communicator. He was able to clearly articulate his vision and motivate others to follow him. He was also a great listener, and he always took the time to understand the needs of his employees and customers. And he's quoted as saying, you're only as good as the people you hire, and there's nothing more fun for me than rubbing elbows with a bunch of operators and talking shop. Number 4, be a servant leader. So Ray believed that leaders should serve their followers, not the other way around. He was always willing to roll up his sleeves and get his hands dirty, and he always put the needs of his employees first. 5, be decisive. Kroc was not afraid to make tough decisions, even when they were unpopular. He knew that sometimes the best way to move forward was to make a decision and then adapt as needed. 6, be willing to take risks. So Ray was a risk taker. He was not afraid to try new things, even when they meant taking a chance. He knew that sometimes the biggest rewards come from taking the biggest risks. And he's quoted saying, you have to take risks. I don't mean to be a daredevil. That's crazy. But you have to take risks, and in some cases, you must go broke. If you believe in something, you've got to be in it to the ends of your toes. Taking reasonable risks is part of the challenge. It's the fun. 7, be persistent. He never gave up on his goals, no matter how difficult they seemed. And he was able to overcome obstacles and achieve success because he refused to give up. 8, be positive. So he's a positive person. He always has a positive outlook, even when things were tough. He believed that a positive attitude was contagious, and he was able to create a positive work environment that inspired others to do their best. 9, be humble. So he never forgot where he came from, and he always treated others with respect. He knew that his success was due to the hard work of his employees and customers, and he was always grateful for their support. Finally, 10, be a good example. So he lived his life in a way that was consistent with his values. He was honest, trustworthy, and fair. He was also a hard worker and a dedicated leader. And he's quoted in saying, my management style proceeded on the strength of my salesman's instinct and my subjective assessment of people. I've been wrong in my judgments about men, I suppose, but not very often. And so some parallel here in terms of like that salesman instinct or the natural kind of salesman and experience there, I think goes back to John Chambers being kind of quoted and being the natural pitchman for Cisco. Is a kind of great quality to learn sales and then have that be a good quality to follow as a CEO and leader of a company. So we'll go into a few more qualities here that were touched upon maybe a little bit, but not explicitly called out in that 10 lessons of leadership here. So in addition to that, I think Ray also was driven and an ambitious leader, and he was always looking for new ways to improve McDonald's and try to expand that company reach. And again, back to risk, he says, if you're not a risk taker, you should get the hell out of business. He was also a competitive leader. He was always looking for ways to outdo his competitors, and he was always willing to take risks to do so. Part of that was an attention to detail and a commitment to excellence. So he was a very detail-oriented leader. He was obsessed with quality and consistency, and he made sure that every restaurant met his high standards. He also had an obsession for cleanliness in his restaurants, and he's known for being extremely particular about every corner of his restaurants. He expected every employee to be committed to that cleanliness and excellence in his restaurants as he was. And he said, I believe that this is one of the great traits of a leader as well, to be committed to every single detail in your plans, your events, and so on. Your commitment to this details is your commitment to excellence, and it will set you one notch above your competition. On the flip side, though, in terms of his leadership style, it's not without its flaws, drawbacks, and maybe what we can allude to with some of his failures. And so he also, at the same end, with the autocratic style, could have been demanding and impatient, not always willing to listen to feedback. However, I think his strengths far outweighed his weaknesses. In some cases, he could be ruthless, really a kind of complex, not very, I guess, controversial figure, but he was also, just a very visionary leader, I think, overall, that I think to achieve that, you have to be demanding, you have to be kind of ruthless in your pursuit of success there. And so going into the failures, there's not too many to highlight here. We did mention things about the leadership style that could have, not as been favorable to some as others. There's some points of not always being a good steward of the brand. His focus on expansion and profit led to some corners being cut, such as the use of lower quality ingredients and the hiring of less qualified employees. This led to the decline in the quality of McDonald's food and service. There is a story also, too, that he was going to finalize a franchise agreement with the McDonald's brothers, and he sent a letter to Walt Disney. They had met as ambulance attendant trainees at Old Greenwich, Connecticut during World War I. Kroc wrote, I have very recently taken over the national franchise of the McDonald's system. I would like to inquire if there may be an opportunity for McDonald's in your Disney development. According to one account, Disney agreed, but with a stipulation to increase the price of fries from 10 cents to 15 cents, allowing himself the profit. Kroc refused to gouge his loyal customers, leaving Disneyland to open without a McDonald's restaurant. So maybe a bigger what if as to if that agreement was struck as to McDonald's being within Disneyland and maybe gaining a faster presence and a bigger presence, frankly, from what we saw with the growth of Disney there too. So as we've seen with other leaders and as their empire grows, there's always going to be some opportunities or things for which a right decision is not always going to be made, and I think in hindsight can always be looked back on and kind of criticized or looked as a failure if it's not executed or pursued at that time. And so what we will go into now is some of Ray's mentors and heroes. So for that, here's some of the key people that influenced him. And so Alois Kroc, which was Kroc's father, who instilled in him a strong work ethic and a belief in the importance of customer service. Ethel Fleming Kroc, which was Kroc's wife, who was a strong and supportive partner. He also mentioned some business partners, so he learned from his business partners, such as Harry Sonnenborn, the man who helped him finance the expansion of McDonald's. He points to employees as well, so he learned from his employees, such as Fred Turner, who helped him develop the McDonald's system of standards and procedures. And finally, he learned from his competitors too. So Kroc learned from Burger King, which forced McDonald's to innovate and improve its products and services. And so that really encapsulates the episode here on Ray Kroc, a shorter one with this in terms of a quick profile of him. I think he's too big of a figurehead to not cover off on from a leadership standpoint in terms of what he was able to do with McDonald's and the business savviness that he exhibited. Again, from a leadership style, I think he was viewed as autocratic, kind of making the decisions more so on his own. But, I think he had a kind of stubborn vision that he wanted to execute, saw it, and really then guided a lot of the decisions to make that into what we see as McDonald's today, which he helped to franchise and build throughout. So that is it for episode 9 and Ray Kroc. Hope to see you back here soon for episode 10. Thanks.